I want you to do me a favor right now. Just picture the laundry situation in your house. Like visualize the actual hamper.
We are starting a deep dive on high-stakes negotiation with my laundry hamper because it is totally overflowing right now, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, it usually is, right?
Yeah.
But just bear with me for a second. Think about who actually does the laundry, or who calls the plumber when the sink suddenly explodes, or who handles those really awkward dinner reservations with the in-laws.
Oh, I see where you're going.
Right. Because in almost every household, there is one person who eventually just becomes the person for that specific task.
Sure, yeah. It's the path of least resistance. You kind of just fall into those roles based on who hates the task less.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Did you ever actually sit down at the kitchen table, draft up a constitution, and sign a formal peace treaty about, who separates the whites from the colors?
Definitely not.
Yeah.
I mean, if we did, I probably would have negotiated a much better deal for myself.
Right. You didn't sign a contract. It just happened. It happened through these tiny, small signals, little adjustments, silent agreements, maybe a heavy sigh here and there. And that is exactly where we are starting today. Because that dynamic, that silent drifting into roles, that is negotiation in its absolute purest form.
It is the ambient condition of a relationship.
Ooh, that is such a great phrase, the ambient condition.
Yeah, it really is.
Because it's two people needing a shared outcome and figuring out how to get there without even realizing they are actively negotiating. And that concept is the launchpad for today's deep dive.
It is a fascinating premise, and we are looking at a really dense stack of insights today from a very specific source. We are analyzing the methodology of the SEER team.
Which is Vincent and Jane Sear, right?
Exactly. They are real estate heavyweights based out in Pennsylvania and Delaware. We are talking nearly 2 decades of experience here, hundreds of millions in transactions.
And usually, I gotta say, when we look at real estate sources, I feel like we are expecting something like how to flip a house in 30 days or, I don't know, 5 interest rate hacks.
Right, the usual tactical stuff. But this is completely different. While their expertise is in high-stakes property, so luxury homes, divorce sales, corporate relocation, the core lesson here isn't actually about brick and mortar.
No, it's about human psychology.
Exactly.
So the mission of this deep dive is to completely dismantle that Hollywood version of negotiation. The table pounding, the take it or leave it stuff, and we want to replace it with something much more subtle. Because the SIR team argues that negotiation isn't a battle you fight at a table.
No, it's a language.
Right. It is a language of trust. You speak way before you even get to the room.
And the most critical insight, the one that really stopped me in my tracks reading this material, is their argument that the most important negotiation isn't even with the person sitting across the table.
Which sounds counterintuitive.
Totally. Because it's about helping someone negotiate with themselves.
Which honestly sounds a bit like therapy.
It borders on it, for sure.
Yeah.
But it is highly, highly strategic. If you are trying to win the conversation by dominating the other person, the SIR team would say you have likely already lost the deal.
So let's unpack that. Because I think most of us, if we are being honest with ourselves, we have this kind of Suits or Wolf of Wall Street idea of negotiation completely ingrained in our brains.
Oh, absolutely. The industry myth.
Right. You picture the boardroom. Everyone is in these incredibly expensive suits. The air conditioning is humming. The tension is just palpable. Someone slides a piece of paper across a mahogany table. It is a total performance.
And the source material points out that the real estate industry, and frankly the business world at large, really loves to sell this myth. They portray negotiation as this dramatic moment with a capital M. The offer, the inspection, the appraisal gap.
Actually, just for clarity, because I always get the specific term mixed up, the appraisal gap is when the bank says the house is worth less than what you offer to pay.
Right. Correct. So you offer $500,000, the bank says it's only worth $480,000. That $20,000 is the gap.
Got it. Okay.
And in the standard view of the industry, that gap is the battle. That is when you roll up your sleeves and you fight for your client's money. It's framed as this aggressive skill you perform under intense pressure. It involves toughness and tactical maneuvering.
Like a gladiator sport, almost.
Exactly like that. But here is the reality check, and this is where the SIR methodology totally flips the script. By the time an agent, or really anyone in business, is sitting at an offer table, the outcome has arguably already been decided.
Wait, decided when?
Weeks ago. Maybe even months.
Wow.
The negotiation actually started the moment they picked up the phone for the very first time. How was their etiquette? How do they treat the receptionist? How do they handle the basic scheduling of the first showing?
Wait, so you are saying if you are rude to the other agent on the phone in week 1, you have already lost leverage for the actual price negotiation in week 6?
100%. Because you have signaled that you are difficult to work with. You have signaled that you are an adversary. So when you finally get to the hard part, the actual money,
Yeah.
the other side is already armored up.
They're on the defensive.
Right. They are way less likely to give you the benefit of the doubt.
This is what they call invisible negotiation in the source text.
Yes. Because it doesn't look like a business deal. It looks like just being a decent person.
Yeah.
But it is actually the most consequential part of the entire transaction.
Yeah.
Because every conversation is a negotiation.
Every conversation is a negotiation. That is a heavy concept. I mean, it makes me feel like I need to watch every single word I say, like I'm constantly on trial or something.
Well, it shouldn't feel like you're policing yourself.
Yeah.
It is much more about awareness. It is realizing that trust is basically a bank account. And you are either making deposits or withdrawals with every single interaction.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right. If you are overdrawn when the crisis hits, you can't
Yeah.
negotiate your way out of it. You just don't have the capital.
Okay, I really want to pivot to the internal side of this now, because we said earlier that the real work is helping people negotiate with themselves.
Right. This is where the psychology gets really, really interesting.
There's a specific story in the source material from Jane Sear that I think perfectly illustrates this dynamic. It is the story of the rebound buyer.
Oh, this story. It is heartbreaking, but also incredibly instructive when it comes to human behavior under stress.
So set the scene for us. What happens?
Okay, so Jane is working with a client who just lost a property. And not just any property. This was the one.
Oh, no.
Yeah, they had emotionally moved in. They were in a multiple offer bidding war, which, is a pressure cooker in itself.
Yeah.
They went to their absolute max budget. They gave it everything they had, and they still lost.
And anyone who has bought a house in a competitive market knows that specific kind of pain. It is not just losing a product. It is losing a whole future you had already imagined for yourself.
Completely. It is actual grief. Real grief.
Yeah.
So the client comes back to Jane, and they are completely heartbroken. But then they do something really interesting. They give Jane a new mission.
What's the mission?
They say, find us an identical replacement.
Locked specification.
Exactly. They want the same exact street, the same layout, the same kitchen island. They're completely adamant. Get us the clone.
Now, if I am a typical agent or really just a typical problem solver in general, I might look at that request and say, okay, I will set up a search alert for that exact criteria.
Sure, the compliant route.
Right. Or if I'm feeling a bit more argumentative, I might say, hey, that house doesn't exist anymore. You need to be realistic.
And both of those responses would be completely wrong.
But why? Because one is compliant and one is truthful. How can they both be wrong?
Because Jane recognizes what is actually happening under the surface. This isn't a house hunt anymore. This is, as she puts it in the text, grief with a to-do list.
Grief with a to-do list. That is such a powerful phrase. It reminds me of how people act after a really bad breakup. Like, I want to date someone who looks exactly like my ex but isn't my ex.
That is the perfect analogy. The client isn't actually being difficult. They're protecting themselves. The psychological analysis here is that the rigid specification, the demand that it must be exactly like the one we lost, it's a form of emotional armor.
Walk me through that. How does demanding an impossible house protect them?
Well, think about it. If they can find the exact clone of the house they lost, then they don't have to actually feel the loss. It is a form of denial.
Oh, wow.
But more importantly, if they lock in on completely impossible criteria, they protect themselves from falling in love with a new house.
Because if I only look for a ghost, I don't have to risk being vulnerable with a real house that might just reject me all over again.
Exactly. It is a way to control the uncontrollable.
So if Jane argues with them, if she uses logic and says you're being irrational, she is basically attacking their emotional armor.
She becomes the enemy. She just becomes another source of pain for them.
But if she just agrees to look for a ghost house that she knows doesn't exist, she isn't doing her job. She is just wasting everyone's time.
Precisely. It is a trap either way.
So what does she actually do? This is the part that I found so fascinating. She stops negotiating with them about the criteria, and she starts participating in the negotiation they are having with themselves.
She acts as a guide, not a combatant. She doesn't force the issue at all. Instead, she asks very specific questions. And notice the shift in these questions. She doesn't ask, how many bedrooms do you need, or what is the square footage?
What does she ask?
She asks, what did you love most about that house? When did you know it was the one? If that feeling existed in a house with a totally different layout, would you want to know?
She is pivoting from the object to the feeling.
Exactly. These questions act as a proxy. She is helping the client realize that the locked specification, the literal walls, the floor plan, wasn't really what they wanted. They wanted the light, the flow, the safety, the life they imagined living there.
She is helping them separate the dream from the specific address.
And she is doing it without ever telling them they are wrong.
Yep.
That is the absolute key here. If you tell someone they are wrong, they dig in.
Right.
But if you ask them a question that helps them discover they might be wrong, they evolve.
But here is the catch, and the SIR team makes a really big point of this. You can't just do this on day one.
Nope, absolutely not.
I mean, if I just met you 5 minutes ago and I started asking deep, probing questions about your feelings and suggesting you ignore your own stated criteria, you'd probably fire me.
I would think you were pushy, totally condescending, and that you weren't listening to a single word I said.
Right. You'd be like, I said I want a colonial. Stop asking me about my feelings.
Exactly. So this brings us to what they call the trust arc. Jane can only ask those probing questions because she has earned the right to ask them.
The source material talks a lot about how clients arrive with their guards up. And it makes the point that this doesn't mean the client is difficult. It means they are rational.
That is a very important distinction to make. We so often label hesitant people, whether it's a client, a boss, or even a teenager, as stubborn or difficult.
Yeah.
But think about the context. In real estate, they have maybe been oversold in the past. They have been ignored by other agents. They are about to make literally the biggest financial decision of their lives. Being guarded is the smartest move they can make.
So they run what the SIR team calls secret tests.
Yes. Usually without even knowing they are doing it, it is entirely subconscious vetting.
I love this concept of secret tests. It honestly makes me wonder how many I have failed in my own life without knowing it. What are some of these tests?
Well, one big one is the test of patience. Is this person patient with my dumb questions, or do they redirect me? Do they sigh when I ask to see the basement for the third time?
And then there's the test of truthfulness.
Ah, the yes man test. This is the big one.
And how does that one work?
Let's say we walk into a house. It smells like wet dog. The roof is clearly sagging, and it is overpriced by $50,000. But I turn to you, my agent, and say, I think this place has good bones. Maybe we should offer full price.
And if I say, yeah, absolutely, great idea, just to get the deal done.
You failed the test. I might feel good in that exact moment that you agreed with me, but deep down, I now know I can't actually trust your judgment. I know you were just a transaction machine trying to get a commission.
So to pass the test, you actually have to disagree with the client.
You have to tell them the truth, even if it is incredibly inconvenient. You have to say, I know you like this, but look at that water stain. Look at the comps. I don't think this is a safe investment for you.
That is high risk in the beginning.
It really is.
Mm-hmm.
But that is how you build the capital for the harder conversations later. In week one, every interaction is a test.
So let's look at that timeline, week 1 versus week 6.
Okay, so in week one, a hard question from the agent feels like pressure. If you say, why won't you look at this other neighborhood, the client hears, I don't want to drive you to your preferred neighborhood because I'm lazy.
But by week 6,
By week 6, if you have passed the tests, if you have shown up, told the truth, put their interests first, that exact same question lands completely differently. Why won't you look at this other neighborhood is heard as, she knows what we want, maybe she sees something we don't, we should really listen.
it shifts from sales pressure to counsel.
It completely changes the physics of the relationship. There's a great quote in the source material that summarizes this perfectly. A client who trusts you doesn't negotiate with you. They negotiate alongside you.
They negotiate alongside you. That is the ultimate goal.
That is the turning point. Once trust is established, the client stops protecting their position against you. They stop hiding their real budget. They stop playing games with their timeline.
Because they know you aren't going to use it against them.
Right, they start sharing the actual situation.
It is like, in the beginning, the client is negotiating against the agent to protect themselves. Like, I won't tell you my real max price because you'll just make me spend it.
Exactly. But once the trust is there,
Yeah.
it becomes, hey, here's my real max price. Help me get the best value. The adversarial negotiation between the client and the agent just completely evaporates.
Which brings us back to Jane's story about the grieving buyer. Because there is a resolution there that I think really proves this entire model works.
It does. So remember, the client was totally locked in. Find me the clone. But Jane didn't fight them. She built trust over time. She asked the right questions. She passed the secret tests of patience.
And eventually?
Eventually, because Jane hadn't forced the issue, the client saw what she was trying to show them. They stopped looking for the house they lost. They recovered the capacity to find the right home for them.
And the key detail here is that they didn't find an identical replacement.
No, not at all. They found a completely different home. A home that didn't look anything like the old one, but gave them that feeling they were chasing.
The source material says she didn't just get them to see the next property. She restored their capacity to find what they were actually looking for.
That is the why of this whole deep dive.
Mm.
If Jane had just taken the order, okay, I'll look for the clone, they never would have found a house. They would have been chasing a ghost forever. She had to help them negotiate with their own grief to get to the result they actually wanted.
This leads us to the maxim that the Sari team operates by, which is actually the title of this deep dive. Every conversation is a negotiation until it isn't.
That phrase, until it isn't, that is the destination.
I want to drill down on that. What does the isn't phase actually look like? Is it just that everyone is happy and smiling?
No, it is much more structural than that. The isn't phase is when the positions just dissolve. It is when the client stops asking whether to trust the counsel and starts asking what the counsel is.
So it is no longer, are you trying to trick me? It is, what do we do next?
Precisely. The negotiation stops being a contest between two parties, agent versus client, and becomes just the work. We are a team now, facing the market together.
It takes the adversarial nature completely out of it. It is not, I win, you lose. It is, we are solving this problem together.
And that is why the SEER team says the professional's goal is to get the relationship to that exact point. Because once you are there, the actual mechanics of the job become so much easier.
Give me an example of that.
Well, take a really tough conversation. Telling a client their house is overpriced, or telling them they should walk away from a deal they absolutely love because of a bad inspection.
In the early negotiation phase, those are fighting words.
Yes. In week one, telling someone to lower their price is an attack on their home's value. It feels personal. But in week 6, in the isn't phase, it's just strategy. They know you aren't saying it to get a quick commission. You are saying it because it is the right move for them.
It really reframes the whole concept of being a good negotiator. I feel like we usually think of a good negotiator as someone who is a smooth talker, maybe a little aggressive, someone who can close.
Right, the closer, the shark.
Yeah. But this suggests that a great negotiator is actually someone who is patient, empathetic, and incredibly consistent. Someone who understands that the real barriers are usually internal things like fear, grief, mistrust.
It is less about rhetoric and way more about resonance.
That is a great way to put it. It is about listening loudly enough that the other person feels safe enough to drop the act.
Listening loudly, I like that a lot. It implies real effort.
It is active. It is not just sitting there waiting for your turn to speak. It is listening for the subtext, like Jane listening to the I want a clone request and actually hearing I am hurting and I don't want to get hurt again.
If she had listened literally, she would have failed them. She had to listen emotionally.
And that is the difference between a transaction and a relationship. A transaction handles the literal request. A relationship handles the underlying need.
So we have gone from laundry disputes to real estate to deep human psychology today.
As we always do.
Naturally.
Let's synthesize this for the listener, because we covered a lot of ground, and I want to make sure these takeaways are really actionable.
Sure. Let's break it down. First, it starts with the realization that negotiation is everywhere. It is completely invisible. It is not just the big moments. It is the small signals, the ambient condition.
Then we have the myth versus reality. Don't be fooled by the Suits version of negotiation. If you are waiting for the boardroom table to start negotiating, you are way too late.
Then we have the trust arc. People are rational to be guarded. You have to pass the secret tests, patience, truthfulness, the yes man test. You have to prove you are deceiving them, not yourself.
And finally, the goal, getting to they isn't. Getting to the place where negotiation dissolves into true partnership.
Where you are no longer negotiating with them, but alongside them.
It is such a useful framework, even way outside of real estate. I'm thinking about leadership, management, even parenting.
Oh, parenting is definitely just a never-ending series of secret tests.
It really is.
Do you actually care about why I'm upset, or do you just want me to be quiet? That is a secret test every single kid runs on their parents.
And if you fail that test, if you just try to win the argument to get some silence, You are in a negotiation battle. You are stuck in the week one phase forever.
Exactly. But if you pass it, if you listen to the feeling, not just the behavior, maybe you get to counsel, you get to the point where they actually ask for your advice.
The principles are universal. Empathy is the ultimate negotiation tool because it disarms the need for the battle in the first place.
Well said.
I want to leave you, the listener, with a specific thought to mull over today. We talked a lot about these secret tests that clients and people in general run on us.
The tests of patience and intent.
I want you to think about a relationship or an interaction you are really struggling with right now. Maybe it is a boss, a client, a teenager, a partner, and you feel like you are constantly battling at the negotiation table. You're constantly trying to win the point, prove you are right, get your way.
That is a really frustrating, exhausting place to be.
Ask yourself this. Are you trying to win a negotiation at the table when you haven't yet passed the secret tests to earn the right to be heard?
That is the critical question. Have you done the invisible work first? Have you built the trust that turns pressure into counsel?
Because if you haven't, no amount of logic, data, or clever arguments will work. You are just banging your head against their emotional armor.
You have to help them negotiate with themselves first. And you can only do that if they actually trust you.
Every conversation is a negotiation until it isn't.
Getting to isn't is the whole job.
A huge thank you to the SIR team, Vincent and Jane, for these insights. It is pretty rare to find business advice that cuts this deep into how humans actually operate.
Agreed. It completely changed how I view the deal.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We will see you next time.
See you next time.